Today, I'd like to talk about the end time beast and his mark. You know, we hear a lot of things about what the mark of the beast is. A lot of people have all their suppositions. And again, those things are based on what? You know, is it based on science fiction? Is it based on human reasoning? Is it, based on the way that they think that some of these things can be fulfilled? People believe it might be a chip, or it might be one of these RFID readers, or it might be um, some implantation under your skin, or a barcode on your skin, or I've heard people think that it's a social security number, but pretty sure it's not going to be that, considering I'm not sure that we're going to have social security here for too long. But yeah, again, we can see to a certain degree how silly some of these things can be when people think that that's what it is, and now we've come and we see through the passing of time, and in what is a relatively short period of time, we've seen some of these things fail, or not come to fruition, or not be able to come to fruition because they're not true. So I think at the end of the day, I think people hear about the beast and they get little pictures of what the beast is, or who the beast is, and what the mark is, and they try to put these things together, but they haven't gone through and completely put the Bible together, here a little, there a little, to come up with a complete picture of the beast and his mark. So today, I'd like to go over, we'll begin with what is the beast, and we're going to start back a long time ago to come up to who the beast is going to be today. And we'll see this again, like I said, here a little, there a little. But Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Revelation 13 and 17, these all talk about some of the beast power in the past, as well as what's coming in the future. So let's go ahead and begin in Daniel 2 and verse 31. Start from the beginning of some of these images, and we'll go through their prophetic meaning. We'll try to let the Bible interpret the Bible, and let the Bible show us just who and what the beast is and what his mark will be. Daniel 2, and we'll begin in verse 31. Again, this is going to be somewhat of a cursory look at the different kingdoms, the images of the beast and whatnot, because I'm sure we could probably fill 10 sermons easily just going through some of these and who they were in their throughout history. But Daniel 2, in verse 31, it says, "You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces." And we'll find out later that that was actually Christ, who's the stone that was cut without hands, in terms of these four world ruling empires that are being portrayed. "Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that was struck, the image, became a great mountain, filled the whole earth." So we see that their end of these world ruling empires, the ones that are on earth, will come to end when Christ returns, and he's the only one that can actually subdue these empires and completely subdue them, and then of course replace them with the government of God. Verse 36, "This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom," speaking to Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon. "You, a kingdom, power, strength, and glory, and wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hands and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold." So this was the first world ruling empire as portrayed by this vision. And it was one of, again, high quality, but not necessarily that big as portrayed by the gold and then the head. "But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. Then another, a third kingdom of bronze." So the inferior one was the silver one. "And then another one, the third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So what we're seeing is they'll go through and they'll replace the one that was before it to become the next world ruling empire. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Again, we're going through and describing the characteristics of the kingdom, and this is a prophecy for the future of things that had not yet happened. And as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So it's going to happen during the time. So we see that these kingdoms are going to last up until the return of Christ, but then it's going to be Christ that's going to, as he said, overturn these the kingdom that it will be extant at the time of his return. And then verse 45, inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces, the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. These things are going to happen. So now we don't have to guess at who the second kingdom was. We can just look at Daniel 5, and it's revealed. Again, as we go through some of these interpretations, and I think as we've read in the Bible before, you look at stuff and you go, what in the world does this mean? Well, same thing for Daniel in many instances. He didn't know. It had to be revealed to him, and then through his writings, it has been revealed to us. And again, this is before the fact too. Daniel 5, verse 1. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast, and gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar, who was the first ruler of the Babylonian Empire, the head of gold, had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, and that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Verse 4, they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The queen tells Belshazzar about Daniel in verse 10. And then verse 22, but you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart. And he knew what God had done previously, especially to his father, who, for 7 years was as an animal and, grazed the field, and his fingernails grew out and his hair grew out. And he more or less was as an animal for that long. And then, of course, after 7 years, Nebuchadnezzar either knew or had it revealed to him what had happened. And of course, he was humbled when he thought he was a big shot. But Belshazzar obviously has not learned the lesson from others, and so his lesson is going to be taught to him. In verse 23, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords and your wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which you do not see or hear or know. Of course, because they're not gods, is his point. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you've not glorified. You didn't give him the recognition, the true recognition that he deserved. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and his writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written, many, many tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word, many. God has numbered your kingdom. Again, this is as the prophecy said from the beginning, is that there would be one that would supersede it. Granted, it'd be one inferior, but nonetheless, God, being in charge, was going to give it to them. And God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Verse 27, tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting in Peres. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. This is who the next empire is, the one of silver, the one that God was going to now fulfill the next part of the prophecy. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. In verse 31, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Let's go over to Daniel 8. We'll look at the third kingdom. Again, we're going through and doing a quick synopsis of what the kingdoms were, and as we proceed to the very last one. Third kingdom in Daniel 8 and verse 1. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me. So again, this is before even the second kingdom took over. A vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had appeared to me the first time. Then I lifted my eyes, verse 3, and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram, which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher one came up last. What does that mean? Well, let's go on to verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And I was considering, and as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Again, what does that mean? And then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacking the ram, broke his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to withstand him. But he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. In the place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. This is what I was talking about. You get a dream like this, and you go, what in the world does that mean? And this is the thing about, a lot of revelation that God has given, is that it's up to God to reveal what it's meant. Obviously, Daniel knew that this was a vision. He had no idea what it meant. So let's skip down to verse 16. We don't have to guess. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision, which he obviously didn't understand. He said, the ram which you saw having 2 horns, the first one, they are the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. As for the broken horn and the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall rise out of that nation, but not with its power. So now we've seen, okay, so we knew that the Medes and the Persians were the second, that's silver, but now we've moved to the third. And it's talking about Alexander the Great being this great horn that came up and led the kingdom of Greece and, fulfilled his expansion. And, from what I remember about Alexander the Great, he was raised by Aristotle and taught a lot. And I think he took it from there. But Alexander took over his father's, when his father was assassinated, and then, began the expansion of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. And Alexander, even some of the stuff that he did back then, from what I understand, is still being studied today in terms of how do you take over the world, for the military types and whatnot. But also then it goes on, as we know too from history, is that when Alexander the Great died, that the 4 generals then took the position. And we see that, again, this is all stuff happening and being written way ahead of time, and God's the one who obviously prophesied it and knew that these things were going to happen, can make the events happen so that everything falls into a place. But the 4 kingdoms then arose out of that nation, but were not nearly as impressive as Alexander the Great was. So we've gone now through the first 3 kingdoms of the statue that we were first reading about. So now Daniel 7 and verse 3. It just, we have another vision here, but it's one that's parallel to the one we first saw. It says, four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. So the first one was a beast like a lion with eagle's wings, and that was the Babylonian Empire. Then we had the beast like a bear as we go down. I'm just going to sum it up a bit here, which was the second world ruling empire of the Medes and the Persians. And then the third was the beast that was like a leopard with four heads, which was the Greco-Macedonian Empire of Alexander the Great, which was, like we just said, later divided up among his four generals. And it had the four heads of the leopard, which would represent the four generals. And then we come to the fourth kingdom. This kingdom was one that would encapsulate and engulf all that had preceded it. And history goes on to tell us that this would be the Roman Empire. In verse 23, describing the Roman Empire, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth. And so we see right here the beast is a symbol, a symbol of a kingdom or a government, which shall be different from all other kingdoms and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. And then verse 24, the 10 horns are the 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom. So in other words, the Roman Empire would fall, but it would substantially survive through the 10 renewals or the resurrections of the Roman Empire all the way up until the return of Christ, like we were just talking about. Is going to be, Christ that comes in the very end that actually puts the final end to the Roman Empire, which began back around 31 BC. So now we've moved forward to this 10th resurrection, which is described as the 10 toes of iron and clay in Daniel 2, the 10th horn in Daniel 7:24 that we were just reading about, the 10th horn of Revelation 13, and then in Revelation 17 there's the beast with the seven heads, and the seventh head has 10 horns. It's the 10th resurrection is this European confederacy of 10 nations, and it's going to be controlled by a dictator, which we call the beast, and a religious leader, the false prophet. So basically what we're seeing here is that it's never really been completely destroyed. It's always been revived. And if you can revive something that it wasn't completely dead, it was just maybe mostly dead. Now waiting, for this last one is where we're at now to come into existence, and we're starting to see this, and this is why we have so much focus on Europe and what's going on there, and especially in the Confederation, one that's led by a Germanic leader, again, which we won't necessarily get into today, but this final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire we see starting to form over there, and which is why, whenever, we've been told to watch and pray always, which is why we specifically, among other places, watch Europe and what is going on. Now, there is one other crucial player in this end time, and it's the little horn. Let's look at Daniel 7, verse 8. So just go back up to verse 8. And it said, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking pompous words. Again, as we know, the first 3 resurrections of the Roman Empire, and this is not to be confused, because you have the Roman Empire and then you have the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire refers to the last 7 resurrections of the Roman Empire, not the first 3 of the 10. The first 3 were a part of the Roman Empire, but they were plucked out, as it talking about, because of their lack of this affiliation with the Roman Church. They did not believe as the Roman Church believed, and thus they were not considered to be part of the Holy Roman Empire, but they were the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. And they had, I don't want to get into it, but a substantially different belief system, and they weren't necessarily in line with the Roman Church and the Roman Empire as it would later become. Skipping down to verse 20, And the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which the 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints, and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came. Again, another term for Christ. And it's talking about the saints, and that the Roman church was prevailing against them. And a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. So then it goes on where we left off in verse 24 and 25. And it goes on to say that, he was going to be responsible for, the 3 of those 10. But in verse 25, let me just highlight that he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, and shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Revelation 13. Let's turn over to Revelation 13. We'll talk a little bit more about this, and then give a little more explanation. Revelation 13, verse 11. Then I saw another beast. So it's a second one, not to be confused with the first one, coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon. So he wasn't really the lamb, obviously, because he spoke like a dragon. And of course, the Bible identifies the dragon as Satan. So this man is going to be completely influenced by Satan, and more than likely even possessed by Satan himself. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, of the Roman Empire, in other words, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Again, after the Roman Empire died, then the Roman Church stepped in, and we pick it up with the 4th resurrection, when the actual healing of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire in terms of the resurrections began. Verse 13, and he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. He's going to perform these amazing miracles. It's going to be this second beast that's being referred to in Revelation 13. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs, which he was granted to do. And just as a side note, okay, if we see that the false prophet here is going, or the second beast, same thing, is going to be doing these miraculous signs, then obviously miraculous signs are not an indication of who God is working with, and something that we cannot be fooled by. If Satan, with all his power, can easily do these things, then we need to recognize then that there are other things that are the deciding factor on who's going to be of God and who's not. And it's not going to be because of miracles. So verse 14, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not to worship the image of the beast to be killed. Those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. That would be the saints. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. A lamb that speaks like a dragon is going to be this religious power claiming to be the Lamb or Jesus Christ, but he is obviously going to be influenced by the dragon or Satan. The second beast exercises all the authority of the first beast from the time the second beast arrives on the scene, and both of the beasts will continue to exist side by side. So this beast performs these great signs, fire coming down from heaven in the sight of men, deceives everybody who dwells on the earth by those signs, which was granted to him to do in the sight of the first beast. The first beast, which is this revival of the Holy Roman Empire, which is the political power, actually doesn't do the signs. But the second beast, the second beast, which is the religious power, actually does. And it's he that causes all to receive a mark in their right hand or on their foreheads. So the little horn is synonymous with the woman riding the scarlet beast in Revelation 17. And if you could turn there, Revelation 17. And it's none other than the Roman Catholic Church, the church of the Roman Empire, of the Holy Roman Empire, the one that has been working hand in hand throughout history and throughout the last 6 revivals of the Holy Roman Empire to bring about eventually this last resurrection, the 7th and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Revelation 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So though it's pretending to be a religious and truly godly figure, it's full of blasphemy. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and was adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. So again, God often describes religion as a woman, and this one obviously is playing the harlot and going after false gods, and is trying to bring others towards that as well. So again, I know that we're talking about a lot of beasts and this and that, and hopefully we're all keeping up. But just one more comment, and I've kind of mentioned it in passing already once, but the beast can actually refer to a man as well as the kingdom or the government. Revelation 19 and verse 20, I think kind of makes this clear. As we're going through this, the beast power is referring to the Holy Roman Empire and this 10th and final resurrection of it. We're talking about the end time beast, not the beast throughout the past history per se, even though we've been painting the picture from it all the way from the time of Babylon till now. But we're talking specifically about the end time beast power. And that obviously that's the Holy Roman Empire. But as we see in 1920, it says, then the beast was captured, speaking of the man. And with him the false prophet who worked signs, again, another man, in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. So it was a bit of a side note just to show you that the beast can refer to the empire as well as the man. Now, back to Revelation 13 and verse 17 and 18. We're going to start to transition here from the beast to the mark of the beast. But let's just have a quick look at the number 666, which, again, nobody wants, everybody knows. And so, the last thing I'm going to have is, 666 on any part of me or on anything that I have. But let's look at what 666 mostly refers to here. In Revelation 13 and verse 17, it says, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, here is wisdom, verse 18. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for as the number of a man, his number is 666. So the number of the beast, his number, is the number of a man. And we're told to calculate this number, 666. It's interesting because the original founder of Rome was King Latinus. And in Greek, every letter has a numerical value. I think we realize that, doing Roman numerals and whatnot, that, you know, V is 5, X is 10 and whatnot. Well, that's true actually in quite a few languages, but whenever you do the numerical value of Latinos, it comes out to be 666, and he was the original founder of Rome. So I think we have a further confirmation that the Roman Empire is actually the beast. But more importantly, what we need to look at here is that the numerical value, because we're looking at Revelation 13, you know, this is John writing around 100 AD. This is way after the beginning of the Roman Empire. And he is saying, and obviously King Latinos, but he is saying in the future leader of the last resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire that we're talking about here in Revelation 13 is going to be 666. It's the number of a man. So what we're looking for in the future that's implied by this statement is that that's going to be his number as well. So it's going to be something that's going to refer to him. And again, I know that there can be a correlation between that and saying, okay, yeah, I want, you know, what the beast has. You know, it's still, but it's not going to be the same exact thing. And we're getting away, you know, to a certain degree from this belief that it can actually be a 666 in your forehead or on your hand, has been portrayed by, you know, other films and other people and blogs and whatnot. But let's look at what we do know about the actual mark. Let's go back up to verse 16 of Revelation 13. And we'll just read these again now in this capacity and this, you know, from this point of view. He said, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. And no one man may buy or sell except who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Everyone wants to be able to buy or sell. So let's skip over to Revelation 14:9. Again, we're looking at what we do know about the mark of the beast. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or in his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So if you take this mark, it's not going to be good for you later down the road, obviously, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. And God's not going to be happy with people, obviously, that take the mark. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, in the presence of the Lamb, verse 11. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they shall have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, whoever receives a mark of his name. Chapter 16, verse 2. And we'll just read these and then we'll make a point about them. So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. And then chapter 19, verse 20. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. And the two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. And then finally, chapter 20, verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God, who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and who had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. So at first glance, and the thing that seems to be most often associated with it, is that there's no buying or selling with the mark of the beast. If you're deceived into taking the mark of the beast, you'll suffer the wrath of God, as we just saw. And if you don't have the mark of the beast, then you're going to reign with Christ. But notice what is associated with the mark of the beast here 5 times in these verses above. It says in 14:9, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark. And then 14:11, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives his mark. 16:2, who had the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. And then 19:20, those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshiped his image. And then 20 verse 4, who had not worshiped the beast or his image and had not received his mark. So the real purpose of the mark of the beast is the turning away from the worship of God to the worship of the beast or his image. And the buying and selling is an after effect of having that mark. Obviously, if you're not going to be worshiping the beast and the power that he has, he's going to make life more difficult. And so I look at this as our first insight into what the mark of the beast is. So how does this then come about? Let's turn to Daniel 7, verse 25. Again, I know that we're going over a couple of these scriptures a couple times, but just emphasizing different things each time. So one of the keys to further understanding what the mark of the beast is found here in this verse, Daniel 7, verse 25. It says, he, and speaking of the religious leader, the false prophet, shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times or seasons and law. And then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. So what's the correlation between these statements here? First off, who are the saints? We were just reading in Revelation 14 verses 9 through 11 is talking about the ones who worshiped the beast and didn't get the mark or got the mark. And then verse 12 goes on, though, and I don't think we read verse 12, but it says, here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That's who a saint is. Now, dead or alive, the ones who kept God's commandments can be referred to as saints as well, but saints can be alive, contrary to certain beliefs. People think that people have to be beatified later down the road or have to have committed a miracle or done a miracle some way, somehow, to actually be a saint. But no, saints are the ones who keep the commandments of God. And then Revelation 15, verse 2 and 3, again, I'll just refer to it. It just says that these people are the ones who believe that God's ways are just and true and keep them. So basically, those are the saints. Those are ones that are going to be put into the hand of the beast. So the point here is that the saints, the ones that are going to have, to go through this tribulation, were the ones that were keeping the commandments of God. Those are the saints. Now, about the changing of the times and laws. What then has the Roman Catholic Church changed in this respect, in terms of times and laws? Can you guess? Satan the dragon, who was mentioned earlier, is obviously the power behind all of this. He's clever, he's deceitful, he's sly. You think about him, which one would he actually choose to change? Naturally, he's like one of the commandments that you can counterfeit, that you can substitute. One in which human reason isn't going to, it's going to tell you, oh, it doesn't really make a difference if we do this one on this day or do it on that day. He's not going to try to, I don't think, deceive people so much about lying, stealing, murder. I think the world recognizes to a large degree that those things are wrong to a large degree. Not completely, because I think that they feel that they can be justified in a lot of other situations. But now you have to ask yourself the question, what commandment affects a man's job or his business, his ability to buy and sell, and to do business? There's only one of the Ten Commandments that has to do with time. And it's this single commandment is the only one of the Ten Commandments that the Roman Catholic Church specifically says it has changed. When I went to catechism, and I may have told this story once or twice before, but as a child, I learned the Ten Commandments incorrectly. The Ten Commandments, that you have the first four that we know. I'm the Lord the God. You shall have no other gods before me. You don't make any graven images to me. You don't take my name in vain. And then it's remember the Sabbath, keep it holy, which was number 4. Then you go all the way to the very end, and the 10th one is do not covet. That's not the way that I learned them. He said, I learned them, said, don't have any more strange gods before me, and then you don't take my name in vain. They conveniently get rid of the graven image one due to all the graven images that are in the church. And then the remember to keep the Lord's Day holy is there, but it's number 3. And then you go down and it changes covet into 2 different ones. Well, let me just state from what is a well-known Roman Catholic catechism. The catechism was just an elementary book that contains the summary principles of their religion. But it's Peter Geierman. It's the Convert's Catechism of Catholic Doctrine, 1946. On page 50, and again, I'll say Geierman also received the apostolic blessing for his works and his labors by Pope Pius X back in 1910. So this man is not just talking out the side of his mouth when he says these things. He's not a rogue, Catholic priest like we're seeing, a few of them nowadays. This man has got the blessing of the Pope. And let's notice this Q&A. I'll just go back and forth on this Q&A that was, that again, he answers the question. He said, what is the 3rd commandment? And the 3rd commandment is, remember the Sabbath day, according to the Catholics. What's the Sabbath day? And his answer is Saturday is the Sabbath day. Okay, so this is what, this guy who's got the Pope's blessing is saying. Why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? And again, we're doing all this under the auspices of changing of times and seasons and laws. And he goes, we observe Sunday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. So he openly admits that the Catholic Church did this. Why did the Catholic Church substitute Sunday for Saturday? The Church substituted Sunday for Saturday because Christ rose from the dead on a Sunday. The Holy Ghost descended upon the apostles on a Sunday. So, again, there's this massive jump in logic, obviously. By what authority did the Church substitute Sunday for Saturday? The Church substituted Sunday for Saturday by the plenitude of that divine power which Christ bestowed upon her. I'm not sure where that happened. But what does the 3rd commandment command? The 3rd commandment commands us to sanctify Sunday as the Lord's day. So all of a sudden it's like Saturday is the Sabbath, is the Lord's day, and then all of a sudden it's not now. What does it forbid? Okay, here's the interesting. The 3rd commandment forbids the omission of prayer and divine worship. So you cannot not pray. You have to pray on Sunday. All unnecessary servile work. So you have to rest on Sunday. And whatever hinders the keeping of the Lord's day. Question, is the desecration of the Lord's day a grievous matter? So if you don't keep Sunday, if you don't rest on it, you don't pray on it, is this a grievous matter? The desecration of the Lord's day is a grievous matter in itself, though it admits of a light matter. So this, again, keeping things in context, and that they openly admit these things. And then what's happened is that all the other daughter churches have, fallen in line. A couple more quotes. The Catholic Church for over 1,000 years before the existence of a Protestant, by virtue of her divine mission, changed the day from Saturday to Sunday. Again, admitting this back in 1893. The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, change, or interpret even divine laws. They're saying that the Pope actually has the power to change the law of God. God, who says he does not change. The Pope has taken it upon himself to change what God says he won't change. Of course, and again, these are all, verifiable sources, quote unquote, good sources. Now, here's another interesting one. Of course, the change, this one from Sabbath to Sunday, was her act. The act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. The change from Sabbath to Sunday is a mark of her ecclesiastical powers. They're admitting that this is a mark for the people. The Roman Catholic Church claims the Pope, the Church, has the authority to change God's law, and it is this mark, just as Daniel 7:25 said would happen. So even though the Roman Catholic Church changed the law concerning the times, it was Constantine, who was a ruler of the beast power, that first enforced the keeping of Sunday. Constantine, again, this is back in March 7th of 321, the first Sunday law was enforced by the Roman Emperor Constantine. His famous edict declared, on the venerable day of the sun, Sunday, right? Again, it's a blatant open, how would you say, catering to the pagans of the time, and it's a form of syncretism. Let the magistrates and the people residing in the cities rest. Let all workshops be closed. Constantine's Sunday law was his mode of harmonizing the Christian and pagan elements of the empire under one common institution. So Sunday worship did not actually originate with the Roman Catholic Church. It's a pagan religion of the Roman Empire is what it was. And it was later that the Roman Catholic Church then enforced and said, this is the day that we need to be keeping. We're going to change it, from what God has said, from what he has instituted, and we're going to change it to Sunday, like the pagans do, And the whole thing about the syncretism, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, was that the reason that they did this was to bring the pagans into the fold. And we're going to take all these beliefs, and put them, this is what syncretism, synchronize them into the religion, into the empire, and that we all be just one conglomerate, and we're going to take the little from here and a little from there, and this is how we're going to now, run things and bring everybody into the fold. So this is what Constantine did, it's what the Pope said, and it's also now what became part of the Roman Empire, and it was enforced. And people were caused to accept it universally by the church. Just read one more thing from the Council of Laodicea and Phrygia. This is back in 364 AD. It says, Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but must work on that day, rather honoring the Lord's Day, Sunday. And if they can, resting then as Christians. But if any shall be found to be Judaizers, let them be anathema from Christ. The church caused them to be killed. When the church branded one anathema or a heretic, the state, as it were, the police of the Roman Empire, began torturing them unless they recanted, and they would do it then until they died. And the laws became so strict that no one could hold a job or engage in business. Unless what? Unless he worked on Saturday and rested on Sunday. And so the world's going to be geared that way in the future in terms of buying or selling. And yet, you look at this and you go, okay, well, I'm not sure if that's a right interpretation or if that could actually be possible in the future. There's a lot of things we don't believe that are going to be possible because you just can't see it right now because, America's so great. How could America ever fall? How could we ever become slaves? How could any of this stuff ever happen? But here's the thing, is that it has happened already in the past. So, you look at that and for one, from a most basic point of view, we're to learn the lessons of history in the past. But from more importantly, we look at what the Bible says. The Bible says these things are going to happen, so we know it's going to happen. But again, I guess the saying is kind of, if you don't learn the lessons of the past, you're doomed to repeat them. And to a large degree, that's going to be true. So we see not only that it's the worship of the beast in its image that the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church, but it is specifically the changed laws, and more specifically, the laws concerning times and seasons and laws, the ones that affect our buying and selling. In other words, most specifically, the Sabbath. So what does God want? Obviously not this. God does not want what we read about in Revelation 13:16, where it says, those who get the mark on their right hand or their foreheads. Let me just read what Mr. Armstrong said about the right hand and the forehead and how that applies here. It says, the Roman Church caused people to receive the mark of pagan Rome, the Sunday observed by the pagan Roman Empire, and the penalty for disobedience was death. 50 million or more were put to death, so says history. It is the only commandment the world will not accept in its mind or forehead and obey by work or rest with the hand. It's the only commandment that can distinguish between those who have the mark of the beast or the sign of God. Now, the book of Revelation is written mostly in symbols. The right hand symbolizes work or labor, the forehead, the intellect or mind. It has to do with what we believe in the mind and whether we obey with the hand. How about God's sign? It also was received in the forehead and the hand. Regarding one of God's annual Sabbaths, we read, it shall be a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, the forehead, that the Eternal's law may be in thy mouth, Exodus 13:9. And then Deuteronomy 6:1, as well as verses 6 through 8. Now these are the commandments. These words, which I command you this day, shall be in your heart, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And then Deuteronomy 11:18. Therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be frontlets between your eyes. So are we starting to see now then what it means by a mark on your forehead and your eyes? This is something that the people are going to take willingly. They're not going to go and be branded. I was just reading an article about this guy who was working for a mine. He worked for the mine for, I can't remember, 20 or 35 years. It was a long time. And they started saying, okay, we're going to implant a little chip so that we can keep track of your hours, And again, you look at a big corporation who may be a greedy corporation, or maybe there's a lot of theft or in terms of time or whatnot, but they're just trying to regulate when people walk into the mine and when they walk out of the mine, and they're doing it with a chip implantation into their hand. But this guy said, no, I'm not going to have a chip in my hand. That's the sign of the beast. That's the mark of the beast. I'm not going to have that. And so the thing was, it just goes on. But the thing was, my point is that that's not what's going to happen. It's not going to be in that way, something that's going to be branded on you, or it's going to be forced, or that people are going to, it's going to be obvious. It's going to be, like we've been talking about, it's going to be the sign of the sign of the Sabbath, the laws that are done away with, and the keeping of, what the Catholic Church is going to say that's in contravention to the Bible. And again, most people, if you ask them, they don't have a problem with this. And then when they start doing miracles, they're going to have even less of a problem. So again, this is kind of all under the heading is of, what do we need to be doing now? Then let's turn over to Ezekiel 9 and verse 4. What is it that God does want from us then? Again, I'll just say this too, and just as you look around the internet, I have come across people that when they look at this, it makes these things make sense to them, or what we're saying today. Not people just within our fellowship, but they're starting to understand these things. But even that being said, they don't know what exactly the mark is, and because of that, even though there's lots of people in Christianity who say, I'm not going to take the mark of the beast. I don't want the mark of the beast. They're looking at the wrong place. And because of that, they are going to take the mark of the beast. So let me just turn there real quick. Ezekiel 9 and verse 4. Here's the mark that God wants us to have. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within. That's the mark that God wants for us to have. Is this one that we should be practicing now, that we look at the world around us and you go, okay, this is not what I want to be a part of. I'm going to, again, we put everything together. It's not just one thing. It's it's a compilation of many things. But God wants us to, as we're talking about, if you're going to be a saint, you have to be keeping the commandments of God. And again, we've talked many times about what God requires of us. So this is what God wants, and especially at this time in the future, when it comes to what's going to be happening, we're to be sighing and crying for all the abominations that goes on. And again, the abominations are going to continue to grow and to become even more prevalent as the beast power then takes a hold along with the false prophet, but at its side. So the mark of the beast is really a mark of disobedience. So disobedience to God's way, and really, in the essence, to God's government. And you're saying, okay, well, I would rather have this government of the beast power, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, over me. That's the one. And again, there's going to be this confusion. And if you have the mark of the beast, it's going to go good for you for a while. But then if you don't, you're going to, again, it's going to be bad for you. But in the end, you will not suffer the wrath of God in the very end. And we see that in, is it chapter 7, verse 3 of Ezekiel? Let me just see. Yeah. Now the end has come upon you, and I will send my anger against you, and I will judge you according to your ways, and I will pay you for your abominations. The angels are going to be instructed to not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees until God has sealed these people, the ones who sigh and cry, on their foreheads. And I think we were reading there in Revelation 20 about those who were beheaded for that fact, for not taking the mark of the beast on their foreheads. So we look at these things and we go, okay, well, what is it? Why is it that we even looked at what was the importance of this? Well, you look at it and you go, well, prophecy is a sign that God is God. When God says something ahead of time and it doesn't happen until later, you go, okay, well, that's proof in a greater power. But even more importantly for us right now is that we have this, as we're talking about, this right mark, and we're watching and praying that all these things are going to happen. But the most important thing is that we live the right life now. That's the most important thing, is that we make this decision to say, okay, these times are coming, and this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to take place. If I have the mark of the beast, then yeah, it's going to go well. But what does that mean? That means that you have to shun God, that you say, okay, I'm not going to keep the Sabbath. I'm going to keep Sunday, and then you justify that some way, somehow. That's a problem. So you have to make the decision now to say, okay, I'm going to keep the Sabbath now, but I'm going to continue to keep the Sabbath in the future. I'm not going to worship wrongly in the future. And that's, to me, the real importance of today's message. It's one thing to know all these other things, but it's so much more to do them. And if we do them, then, as God talks about, we're not going to receive all these problems. He says, and I guess we can just end with this in Revelation 18:4. It says, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive of her plagues. So right now is the time for us to be doing the right thing, to be living, God's way with all of our heart, mind, and soul.